Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Michael Vile, and I am a compliance specialist with the Oregon Board of Licensed Professional Counselors and Therapists, or OBLPCT for short. First, congratulations to all of you who are approaching graduation or preparing to enter the counseling or marriage and family therapy professions. You're entering a field that is incredibly meaningful, challenging, and important. Today's presentation is designed to help make the licensure process in Oregon a little less mysterious and hopefully a little less stressful. We'll talk about how the board functions, what you need for licensure, common mistakes applicants make, and some practical tips that can help you avoid delays. Let's get started. The Oregon Board of Licensed Professional Counselors and Therapists was established in 1990, and our core mission is public protection. That phrase comes up a lot in regulatory work, and it's important because everything the board does is grounded in protecting Oregon consumers by ensuring that counselors and therapists are qualified, ethical, and practicing safely. The board consists of 8 members appointed by the governor and confirmed by the Senate. Those members include licensed professional counselors, licensed marriage and family therapists, a faculty representative from a training program, and public members. One thing students are often surprised to learn is that the board itself is not a giant agency. The board relies on MHRA staff, including licensing and compliance staff, to help administer day-to-day operations. MHRA stands for the Mental Health Regulatory Agency. The MHRA provides administrative oversight to 2 regulatory boards, the Oregon Board of Psychology and the Oregon Board of Licensed Professional Counselors and Therapists. The Board of Licensed Counselors and Therapists meets every other month to conduct official business, such as reviewing disciplinary matters, approving policies, and discussing rule changes. And unlike many government entities, the board is funded entirely through licensing related fees rather than through Oregon's general tax fund. The board has 2 major functional areas, licensing and compliance. On the licensing side, the board determines whether applicants meet the legal qualifications for licensure. That includes reviewing education, examinations, supervised experience, and continuing education. On the compliance side, the board investigates complaints involving unlicensed practice, unethical conduct, or violations of Oregon laws and administrative rules that the board oversees. If necessary, disciplinary matters may go before the board for review and possible enforcement action. That process can include investigations, settlements, contested case hearings, or appeals. One important thing to remember is that the board's role is regulatory, not punitive. The goal is not to catch professionals doing something wrong. The goal is to ensure competent and ethical practice while protecting the public. And I know administrative rules may not sound exciting, but if you're entering a licensed profession, learning how regulation works is actually one of the best ways to protect your future career. This is one of the most important distinctions for students to understand. A regulatory board and a professional association are not the same thing. The board is a governmental regulatory agency. Our role is public protection. We enforce statutes, administrative rules, and ethical standards. Professional associations, on the other hand, exist to promote and advocate for the profession itself. For example, organizations like the Oregon Counseling Association provide networking opportunities, continuing education, advocacy, and professional support. The board does not advocate for the profession in the same way because our legal responsibility is to remain neutral and focused on public safety. Another important distinction is that the board does not provide legal advice or clinical advice. We can explain requirements, rules, and processes, but we cannot tell licensees how to practice clinically or how to handle legal liability situations. Think of it this way. Associations are there to support and promote professionals, while the board is there to regulate professional practice. Both are important, they just serve different functions. This slide highlights a few recent developments involving the board and the profession. One important change is the approval of the Spanish language version of the National Counselor Examination, or NCE. Historically, access to a Spanish version was extremely limited, so this expansion improves accessibility for applicants. Another major development involved military portability rules. These rules allow certain licensed counselors and therapists relocating due to military orders to practice in Oregon through a streamlined process. Like many licensing boards across the country, Oregon continues working to reduce unnecessary barriers while still maintaining public protection standards. You'll also notice that the board has focused heavily on customer service improvements. Licensing systems are complicated. Applications can feel stressful. One of the board's goals has been improving communication, response times, and accuracy. And finally, this slide mentions recent and proposed legislative developments affecting behavioral health professions in Oregon. One thing to remember is that laws and administrative rules can change over time. So throughout your career, staying informed is part of being an ethical professional. I know that may sound intimidating now, but eventually reading rule updates becomes slightly less terrifying. This slide gives you a sense of how much the profession has grown. In 2025 alone, the board received more than 2,200 licensure applications, which was the highest volume in board history. That growth reflects increasing demand for behavioral health services across Oregon and nationally. Both the LPC and LMFT professions have grown significantly over the last decade. What this means for students is that you are entering a profession that is expanding rapidly and continuing to evolve. It also means boards and licensing staff are managing very large application volumes. That's one reason complete and accurate applications are so important. A missing document or incomplete form can delay processing significantly, especially during high volume periods. From the applicant side, it may feel like one small missing item, but from the board side, it's usually one small missing item multiplied by thousands of applications. So organization and attention to detail really matter. This slide shows the continued growth of licensed counselors and therapists in Oregon. Over the last decade, the total number of licensees has increased dramatically. The overwhelming majority of licensees maintain active status, which reflects both strong professional engagement and ongoing demand for behavioral health services. For students, this is encouraging information. It demonstrates that these professions are established, growing, and increasingly important within Oregon's healthcare system. It also highlights why regulatory oversight matters. As professions grow, boards must ensure standards remain consistent, ethical, and legally compliant. The board depends on licensing boards to ensure that individuals practicing counseling and therapy meet minimum competency and ethical standards. That's why licensure is more than just paperwork. It represents public trust. This slide provides a snapshot of the board's compliance and enforcement activity. One thing I always try to emphasize during presentations is that most licensees never interact with the compliance process beyond routine renewal requirements. The overwhelming majority of counselors and therapists practice ethically, responsibly, and professionally. However, the board still plays an important role in reviewing complaints and addressing situations involving possible violations of laws, rules, or ethical standards. Compliance statistics help demonstrate the types of issues that commonly come before the board. These may include boundary violations, record-keeping concerns, unlicensed practice, misrepresentation, supervision issues, or failure to comply with board requirements. The board reviews complaints carefully and evaluates matters individually. Not every complaint results in discipline, and not every investigation results in a violation. Part of the board's responsibility is determining whether there is sufficient evidence that a law, rule, or ethical standard may have been violated. I think students sometimes imagine compliance work as dramatic television-style investigations. However, in reality, much of it involves careful documentation review, administrative processes, and analysis of professional standards. These statistics also serve an educational purpose. They help identify trends, common risk areas, and opportunities for professional education aimed at preventing future problems. Now let's talk about the actual path to licensure. There are three major components. First is your graduate degree, second is supervised clinical experience, and third is completion of the required examinations. In Oregon, applicants generally need at least 3 years, which is defined as 36 months, and 1,900 direct client contact hours of supervised experience. For LMFT applicants, 750 of those hours must involve working with couples and families in the same session. Additionally, up to 400 direct client contact hours and 12 months of supervised experience can be completed during your degree program and may qualify if the board requirements are met. One critical point here is that supervised experience begins only after board approval of the registration plan. That means applicants cannot simply begin accumulating licensure hours automatically after graduation. For examinations, applicants must complete the Oregon Law and Rules exam as well as an approved national competency examination, which we have all of them listed here. The Law and Rules exam is open book, online, and designed to ensure applicants understand Oregon specific requirements. This slide addresses one of the most common areas of confusion. A registered associate is not the same as a fully licensed clinician. Registered associates are individuals working toward licensure under board-approved supervision. They must practice under an approved supervision plan and cannot practice independently. Fully licensed clinicians, on the other hand, may independently practice within their scope. Associates also have specific title requirements. Acceptable titles include professional counselor associate, marriage and family therapist associate, or registered associate. The board does not permit abbreviations such as LPCA or LMFTA. This distinction is important because title usage affects public understanding and consumer protection. This slide also outlines renewal and continuing education requirements. Associates renew annually and do not complete continuing education requirements during registration. Fully licensed clinicians, however, renew every 2 years and complete required continuing education, including ethics, cultural competency, and suicide risk assessment training. One thing I always encourage applicants to remember is that associate registration is not less important than licensure. It is a regulated professional status with legal and ethical responsibilities. This slide walks through the application process. Students may begin preparing materials up to 6 months before graduation. The board's website includes detailed application checklists, and I strongly recommend using those checklists closely. Applications generally require application forms, fees, a supervision plan, college transcripts, fingerprint-based background checks, and supporting documentation. One of the biggest causes of delay is incomplete documentation. For example, applicants sometimes submit transcripts before their degree conferral appears on the transcript itself, or fingerprint checks expire before the application becomes complete, and sometimes forms are missing required signatures. My best advice is this: treat your application like an important legal document rather than just a school assignment, because unlike a forgotten discussion board post, the board unfortunately cannot give partial credit. This slide introduces the applicant portal. The portal is where applicants submit and track much of their licensure information. One thing applicants sometimes assume is that once they submit an application, the process becomes entirely automatic. In reality, applicants should actively monitor the portal throughout the process. The portal helps applicants track submitted documents, review application status, and identify missing items. Checking the portal regularly can significantly reduce delays. If the board requests additional information, responding quickly helps keep the process moving forward. This slide outlines the application steps in more detail. Applicants complete sections involving personal information, background disclosures, educational history, supervised experience, and legal attestations. One important section involves declarations and character and fitness questions. Applicants should answer these questions honestly and completely. Failure to disclose information is often more serious than the underlying issue itself. For example, if an applicant has a prior legal issue or disciplinary history, the board is usually more concerned about honesty and transparency than perfection. Regulatory boards understand that people are human, but the board also expects honesty, accountability, and professional integrity. When in doubt, disclose and provide context. That approach almost always serves applicants better than omission. This slide continues highlighting the applicant portal and application workflow. One important thing to remember is that approval does not occur immediately after submission. Applications move through multiple review stages. Board staff verify documents, review eligibility requirements, and ensure all materials are complete. Some applications move quickly. Others require additional review because of education questions, supervision issues, criminal history matters, or missing documentation. Applicants should avoid making assumptions about timelines. A good rule of thumb is to apply early, respond promptly to board communications, and remain patient throughout the process. Licensure review involves both legal and public protection responsibilities, so careful review is necessary. This slide addresses one of the most common questions the board receives. How long will my application take? The answer depends heavily on how complete the application file is. Once all required materials are received, many applications move relatively quickly. However, delays often occur when documents are missing, forms are incomplete, or additional review is required. Applications involving character and fitness reviews or non-traditional education pathways may take longer. Applicants should regularly check the document list in the portal and carefully review board emails. Another important point is that board approval is communicated formally. Applicants should wait for official approval confirmation before assuming they are authorized to begin practice. I know waiting can be stressful, but from the board perspective, it is much easier to process a complete application once than to repeatedly chase missing documents. And trust me, applicants generally prefer that approach too. Certain disclosures or background check results may require additional review before an application can proceed. Examples include criminal history, prior disciplinary action, or failure to disclose required information. If that occurs, the file may be forwarded to the compliance staff team for further review. That process can involve gathering records, reviewing board policies, executive review, or even board review. Some matters resolve quickly. Others require investigation or additional information from the applicant. I want to emphasize something important here. A compliance review does not automatically mean someone will be denied licensure. This is a standard practice that the board conducts to ensure a thorough review of the applicant's character and fitness to be licensed. Most character and fitness reviews result in the application moving forward and being approved. The board evaluates matters individually and considers context, rehabilitation, honesty, and public protection concerns. Again, transparency is extremely important. Applicants often worry that disclosing information will automatically harm their application, but failure to disclose information usually creates far more serious problems. This slide contains some practical advice that can save applicants a great deal of frustration. First, provide complete and accurate information. Read forms carefully and double check signatures and dates. And always notify the board within the required timelines if important information changes. Second, monitor board communications. Applicants sometimes miss important emails because they go to spam folders or old email addresses. Third, stay informed. The board website, newsletters, and public meetings contain valuable updates regarding rules, procedures, and policy changes. I also encourage students to attend a board meeting at least once. It's one of the best ways to understand how professional regulation actually works. And honestly, board meetings are much more interesting than most people expect. There are still agendas and procedural motions, of course, but behavioral health regulation involves real ethical questions and real public protection issues that directly affect professional practice. These are some of the most common mistakes applicants make. Incomplete supervision plans are extremely common. Applicants also sometimes fail to disclose legal or disciplinary history. Expired background checks, missing forms, and failure to monitor the applicant portal also creates delays. Another major issue is misunderstanding the difference between associate registration and independent licensure. Remember, associate registration allows supervised practice only. The best way to avoid problems is simple: slow down, read instructions carefully, and double check materials before submission. A few extra minutes reviewing forms can prevent weeks of delay later. Now we're shifting more specifically into the registered associate process. This stage is where applicants begin accruing supervised experience toward full licensure. The Registered Associate Plan is an official board-approved framework governing supervision, practice settings, and experience accumulation. This is not an informal arrangement. It is a regulated professional process with documentation and reporting requirements. Applicants should become very familiar with required forms, supervision expectations, and reporting timelines. One important point is that hours must be completed under board-approved supervision. Not every clinical activity automatically qualifies. Applicants who understand those requirements early tend to experience far fewer problems later when applying for full licensure. This slide highlights several important reminders for registered associates. First, registered associates are not yet independently licensed. Practice must occur under an approved supervision plan. Second, applicants should wait for formal approval before beginning clinical work that will count toward licensure. The registration approval email is extremely important because it includes both the registration number and access to the Oregon Law and Rules exam. Associates also need to manage their timelines carefully. The supervised experience process spans multiple years, and organization becomes extremely important. Track your hours carefully, maintain documentation, communicate regularly with your supervisors, and stay informed regarding rule changes or board updates. One reassuring point for associates is that approved hours do not simply disappear, but applicants still need to maintain compliance with renewal and reporting requirements. Consistency and organization are really the keys to success during this phase. This slide brings everything together into a step-by-step roadmap. First comes graduation from a qualifying graduate program. Second is submission of the application and registration materials. Third is board approval and associate registration. Then applicants complete required examinations and supervised experience requirements. Finally, applicants submit a promotion application for full licensure. At that point, independent practice may begin once licensure is officially issued. One thing I always encourage students to remember is that licensure is not just a bureaucratic process. It represents entry into a regulated profession built on ethics, accountability, competence, and public trust. The process may sometimes feel overwhelming, but every stage exists for a reason. And eventually, all of the forms, supervision reports, and administrative requirements become part of your professional foundation. Here are some helpful resources as you navigate your journey. The board website should always be your primary source for current information. Rules, forms, checklists, newsletters, and board meeting information are all available online. Students should also become familiar with the ethical codes relevant to their profession. For LPCs and LMFTs, as well as registered associates, this is the ACA Code of Ethics. I strongly encourage applicants to rely on official sources rather than social media advice or informal online discussions. Unfortunately, licensure advice online is sometimes inaccurate, outdated, or based on another state's statutes. When questions arise, contacting the board directly is usually the safest approach. Thank you all for taking the time to participate in this presentation. On behalf of the Oregon Board of Licensed Professional Counselors and Therapists, we appreciate the important work being done by students, faculty, supervisors, and training programs throughout Oregon. The transition from graduate student to licensed professional can feel complicated, but understanding the process early can make a tremendous difference. I hope this presentation helped clarify the licensure pathway and gave you a better understanding of the board's role. Most importantly, I hope it reassured you that the board wants applicants to succeed. Our goal is not to create unnecessary obstacles. Our goal is to support ethical, competent practice while protecting the public. Thank you again. Congratulations on reaching this stage in your professional journey, and best of luck as you move forward in your careers. And hopefully, after today, Oregon administrative rules and statutes feel a little less intimidating. Thank you.